After gathering information, you then need to start the review process. So the review process has 7 key parts to it. First and foremost, you want to be looking for answers to questions that you have and unclear information. And there are many places to get those answers, and so you need to be aware of what those places are. There's the next day's lecture. Sometimes professors come back and they revisit information. There, your notes. Sometimes it's written there, you just didn't realize it the first time. There is the textbook. There are homework examples. Often, homework examples are geared towards helping us recognize what is clear and what is unclear. And so often, while working those problems, you recognize that, oh, there's this thing I don't understand, this thing that I do need to understand. And so it's very important right here that you recognize that you're still within that learning process and that learning phase, and you will still come across things that you don't understand. There are places you can go to get your answers. The first place, generally speaking, is your professor. Your professor is the professional set out to help you learn and understand this information. Generally speaking, they know the information very, very well. And so, generally speaking, they should be able to help you and guide you and point you in the direction. Other places you can go is your textbook, your homework software, tutors. Um, Sometimes you can just ask your classmates and they will help all y'all can get together and figure out what's happening. So all of these right here are places that you can go to go ahead and try and get that information. Also, there's this place called the internet, and on there you can find a lot of information that can help you. Um, One of the best places to go, interestingly enough, and one of the worst places to go is YouTube, because on just about any topic that you type in, you can find people there to help explain. The issue, however, generally speaking, getting people at the right level of information. Sometimes it's too complex, sometimes they just don't go enough depth. But generally speaking, if you can find someone after you look for a while who can help explain to you the information that you need. Uh, After you've gotten through that process of working problems, getting questions and getting more clarity on all that information right here, at that point, you could go ahead and summarize the main ideas. Sometimes it can be a mental summary, i.e., these are the steps to do this problem, and this is why each step occurs. So you mentally go through the process of explaining why you're doing each step and why each step makes sense to you. When it comes to mathematics, some of these can be skipped, like adding two numbers. You know why you're adding two numbers together. It's a group, so you can get the total of this one amount. But in some cases right here, when, for example, solving a quadratic equation, the quadratic formula that you're using, you need to know why the quadratic formula is the right step getting to that answer. And so you need to understand that you're not just plugging A, B, and C in, but indeed you're helping yourself find the answers to the problem. And of course, you want to therefore synthesize all that information that you gathered. So when you go to your professor and he gives you more information, when you read that textbook, you get more information. And when you do a tutor, you get that information. You want to write that information down. You want to add it to your notes. You want to make sure that it's something that you have just in case you need to go back and look and see what it says. And so you definitely want to go ahead and keep that in mind when you're going on right there. Now, part of the review process is you have to question your understanding. You have to ask yourself questions that are deep to see if you can come up with answers that make sense to you. Then you have to create information based upon that knowledge that you've gathered. You can create flashcards. Flashcards can have simple ideas like definitions, but flashcards can also have a longer explanations and meanings behind ideas and concepts that you want to know. Another good thing right here is you can do diagrams or you can timeline things out if they're time sensitive to help you understand how they fit together and how they work out. Another thing you can do is you can illustrate a relationship. So you can have right here, if you have x is equals to, that can be related to solving using a particular method. You can again illustrating relationships, but if you have something like x plus y is equals to, then that might mean something totally different where you might need to graph. And instead of going through this method right here, you can only put that information down on the graph to understand what's happening. And so you're illustrating the relationship between what you start with and then what you need to do to get to the answer. And so that way you're helping your brain and yourself understand how these things fit together. Another way you can do that right here is you can pretend to be the professor. And thus, you'd have to teach this to someone else. And so what you need to do is create a presentation. And then what you would do is then teach that presentation out loud. There may not be anyone in the room, but that's okay. But what happens is that process of you teaching, we often say that teaching is the highest form of learning. You going through that process of teaching the idea and the concept, explaining the reasoning behind things, really can help you iron out what you understand, what you don't understand, and also reinforce your knowledge so that you you have a better understanding of the information that you have. Again, one of the things that you can do in the process is you must structure your environment. You don't want to be studying a park where birds are flying around and people are always walking by, causing you to distract and pull away from your focus as you look to see who's walking by each time. Uh, if you can study with music in the background and that helps you to study better, you can go ahead and do that. If you study better with a friend, or if you study better at the library, go ahead and make those adjustments. Try and get yourself the optimum place to study. And of course, there are lots of ways, memory aids that can be used to help you make deep connections to the information that you have. Some of them are also used for surface knowledge, which is also important in terms of you need to know your definitions and your concepts. But your memory aids are also important because they help you put that information into your memory bank. There are several kinds of memory aids, but most of those memory aids are based upon the idea of association, that your information in your brain you remember comes from associations. An example is called the memory palace. A memory palace is where you use a physical location and you tie knowledge and information to it. Mnemonics, where you, I think PEMDAS is an example of a mnemonic. Numbers, letters. Sometimes it's hard to remember large sequences of numbers, but if you change those numbers to letters, you can then create a mnemonic or create a story or an anecdote that goes back to that number. Um, Human knowledge for a long time was passed down through stories, and so one of the best ways to learn is to make a story about of what you're trying to learn, understand. That is reflected in the idea of creating a presentation and talking out loud right there. And of course, the main way we learn, the main way our teach right here is focusing on the meaning of the information. If we understand why and how things put together, generally speaking, we have a better chance of understanding and remembering that information. And so, one of those things that we always encourage people to do is to understand the why, understand the connections between past information and current information and why they make those connections make sense.